Coming up, Senator Rand Paul says that House Speaker Mike Johnson needs to grow a spine. I'll discuss the politics of the continuing resolution. I want to argue this is not how representative democracy is supposed to work. Trump has a great way to fire bureaucrats, even those whose terms have not expired, and I'll tell you how and why. Texas State Representative Giovanni Capriglione joins me. He's going to discuss his very novel idea for the state of Texas to create a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
I want to talk about this continuing resolution that is being pushed by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. And I'll begin with a post from a few hours ago by Rand Paul. I had hoped to see Speaker Johnson grow a spine. That alone is an interesting opening line, isn't it? Grow a spine, i.e., he doesn't have one. But this bill, full of pork, shows he is a weak man. Then Rand Paul goes on to say that in the Senate, I'm going to block him. I'm going to block this. I'm going to delay it. I'm going to basically do what I can to stop it. And this indeed is good news because this resolution is bad and it deserves to be stopped. Now, if it is bad and it deserves to be stopped, why would Mike Johnson be pushing it? This question is made even more mystifying when you realize that Mike Johnson knows that there are a lot of Republicans who oppose the bill. Not only that, but they are publicly flaying Mike Johnson in social media and in the media about it. There are some who have even talked about yanking the speakership away from Mike Johnson because this is such a disaster. And a disappointment. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have both strongly come out against this bill. I think that they recognize that this is utterly inconsistent with the spirit of DOGE, i.e. the Department of Government Efficiency. It's what's the point of going in and looking for inefficiencies when right now, on the cusp of the new administration, you're introducing all these new and outrageous forms of spending, and you're sustaining and keeping things that are manifestly horrible. Why would you do that? Now, Mike Johnson was on Fox News talking about why he's doing it, and he gave a really strange reason, because the people at Fox told him, they were like, you know as well as everybody, that you're not going to be able to pass this with Republican support. The Republicans are not unified behind this. On the contrary, there's a good chance that more Republicans will vote against this than will vote for it. And therefore, you are going to rely on the Democrats to vote for it. And then you have some of the Republicans. So the majority of the Democrats plus some of the Republicans is going to give you the majority to get this done. And so right away, our suspicions need to be raised because, think about it, why would the Democrats support this bill if it wasn't their kind of bill, which has their kind of spending and a lot of it built into it? Why would you, Mike Johnson, go along with this kind of nonsense? And I saw that on Fox, one of the hosts said to Mike Johnson, well, Elon Musk says he doesn't like what's in this. What do you say to him? And Mike Johnson gave the strangest answer. He goes, well, I don't like what's in it either. What? If you don't like what's in it, why aren't you blocking it? And I think here we get to the core of who Mike Johnson is. Mike Johnson kind of thinks, well, I really can't. we can't afford to shut the government down. That alone is a good question. Why not? What is so catastrophic that would happen if you did? The answer is nothing at all. But the media would do their usual whipping things up into hysteria. The truth of it is nobody cares. They can do their jumping up and down routine, and no one cares. But Mike Johnson cares. That's the point. He doesn't want that. He's scared of it. And so he thinks he has to do something. So he makes, I would call it a sort of a half-hearted defense of this. And he basically says, hey, listen, this is a 3-month bill. I guess he's saying, yeah, it's bad, but it's bad for 3 months. Yeah, it's wasteful, but we're just going to be wasting money for 3 months. He says a new administration is coming in with new priorities. He's almost implying like we can't have a fresh start now because we have too slim a majority in the House. But the truth of it is, this is a case where Mike Johnson himself could block this. He doesn't want to, because he doesn't want to be, in the eyes of the media, the bad guy. And that's very disappointing. So I think that Rand Paul, I can see why he's saying what he is. It's harsh, but it's not unduly harsh. In fact, I would say it's duly harsh. Why? Well, let's just look at a few elements in the bill. First of all, it continues funding for the Global Engagement Center. What is the Global Engagement Center? These are the people who have been lobbying to get conservative outlets canceled on digital media. The Global Engagement Center has the Global Disinformation Index. They feed all these names and data to the digital companies. This is what the U.S. government, with Republican support or with Mike Johnson's support, is funding, at least funding for the time being. Number two, there's all kinds of nonsense which suggests that there has been no learning or done at all about preparation for pandemics, gain-of-function research, research into vaccine mandates, all of this stuff. It's almost like they just took some old bills with all this spending laid into them, and they just stuck it into the new bill. And quite frankly, this is how these bills get written these days. The members of Congress get the bill. In this case, they did. I believe it was in the evening yesterday. So they get the bill at the last minute. They have maybe a day, in some cases hours, to read it before the vote. So you can't really read it, and you're not supposed to read it, which means you have turned over your legislative authority to the leadership, and they make all the decisions on your behalf. They don't even really bother to consult you. It's kind of like, we'll give it to you at the last minute. So like Obamacare, Debbie says, and quite rightly so. This is a case, I think, where Republicans need to say, listen, we oppose this procedure. So quite apart from all the horrible things that are in this bill, we just should vote no. Just vote no, because we don't agree with the procedure of giving us a bill that can't be read before it is voted on. There's a post today from Vivek who says basically that it's indefensible to ram these measures through, and that's what's happening. They're being rammed through without debate. And, sure enough, it's got stuff like they want a new football stadium in D.C. Who's paying for it? You are. I am. Pay raise for congressmen. I saw kind of a funny exchange in which Dick Durbin is being interviewed by Manu Raju of CNN, and Manu Raju says, people look at the performance of Congress and say, why should we give them more money? Kind of a good question. They don't deserve it. Durbin comes back with a pretty good answer of his own. He goes, hey, what about the media? Half your listeners aren't there anymore, and you're still getting the same paycheck. So this is a case where two people are basically saying to each other, you're overpaid. And they're both right. So this is a case where Durbin deserves a pay cut and Manu Raju deserves a pay cut, and they're both sort of trying to score a point against each other. But this is a subversion of what representative government ought to be about. This is not the way it's supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work is citizens elect representatives in which we put our confidence and our faith, but those legislators need to have a chance to deliberate on this kind of legislation, to weigh priorities one against the other, to vote down each other's pork barrel projects, and to look out for the interests of their own constituents. And you can see, given the way that this is being rammed through, there's simply no chance to do that. Do you ever have the feeling that you're being surveilled and hesitate to share things of interest via text message or email with your friends and loved ones? Recently, outspoken parents at PTA meetings and Catholic Americans have been labeled as domestic terrorists by the FBI. These types of labels can be used to allow the U.S. government to surveil its citizens and others who live abroad without legal due process. Fortunately, there's a remedy for this. The founders of Bunker, it's B-U-N-K-R, Bunker, created an app to uphold people's rights. Bunker is not beholden to any third-party corporation, investor, or government. Bunker deeply believes that privacy is a human right, and everyone on Earth deserves bank-level security. Bunker provides you protection from state and corporate surveillance, as well as cyber criminals. It includes a completely secure and private messenger, a robust password manager, secure cloud storage for your files and documents. Bunker is built to uphold the rights of people and protect them from cyber crimes. Download Bunker from the App Store or Play Store today. Use the offer code Dinesh to get 25% off. Here's a great idea for you to consider. Open an IRA in gold with Birch Gold and get free silver shipped directly to your home. That's right. It's the most wonderful time of the year, the only time of the year that Birch Gold gives away a free 1-ounce silver eagle for every $5,000 purchased. And here's the best part. You don't have to pay a penny out of pocket. Simply convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, and Birch Gold will send you your free silver coins directly to your home. Now, you might be thinking, why? Why do I need to diversify in gold? My guy's headed to D.C. Things are good. Well, the fact is, even an administration trying to reverse a $36 trillion debt isn't going to be able to do that. Not in 4 years. It's like a field mouse trying to stop a freight train. We have a huge amount to pay just on interest on the debt, let alone the principal. So take action to protect your savings now. Text Dinesh to 989898 before December 18th for a free information kit on gold and to claim your eligibility for free silver on qualifying purchases from Birch Gold. Do this today. December 18th, that's today. Again, text Dinesh to the number 989898 for peace of mind that lasts longer than 4 years. I want to explore a question that has come up recently, which is, yes, Trump is going to come in on January 20th, and he's going to inherit this large federal workforce. And at the top of it are political appointees, and there are several thousand of them. And some of them are serving manifestly at the behest of the president. So, for example, let's take the White House Chief of Staff, for example, or the various cabinet secretaries. And those people can be easily fired or removed. But there are people in the government who serve for designated terms. A really good example is Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI. He has, in theory, a 10-year term. And there are many other people, different appointments to various boards and committees and agencies, commissioners of this and agents of that. And they have terms. They have 3-year terms, 5-year terms, 10-year terms. And the question is, can Trump give those people the boot? Because some of them are Democratic appointees. Of course, in the case of someone like Wray, it's actually a Republican appointee, a Trump appointee, but a guy who went rogue, a guy who kind of made a pact with the other side, a bad guy. Now, fortunately, in the case of Wray, Wray is resigning, so Trump doesn't have that problem. Wray is out of there. But what about all the other guys? And there are many federal appointees who are going to claim, hey, my term has not expired, and so I have no intention of resigning. Can Trump do to them what he did on The Apprentice, which is just point his finger at them and say, you're fired? In other words, does that trademark instruction work in the case of federal employees who are there for designated terms? The answer, remarkably, comes out of a case that involves President Biden and the now political commentator and podcaster, but former White House official Sean Spicer. Sean Spicer had been appointed by Trump to serve as a member of the Board of Visitors of the U.S. Naval Academy. Now, in 2020, Trump is out. Biden comes in 2021. But guess what? Sean Spicer still had some time left on his appointment. And then he receives the following letter. Dear Mr. Spicer, on behalf of President Biden, I'm requesting your resignation as a member of the Board of Visitors. Please submit it by the close of business today. Should we not receive your resignation, your position with the board will be terminated effective 6 p.m. tonight. This is, by the way, how Democrats operate. You have a term, it's going to go on, but guess what? There's a new sheriff in town, you're out. Get out by 6 p.m. today. And what does Sean Spicer do? He, along with another guy who was also summarily fired in this way, files a lawsuit. Now, Sean Spicer was very cunning because he actually knew that he would lose the lawsuit. He wanted to lose the lawsuit. What he wanted to do is establish a precedent that would be sanctified by a court, that the president has the right to fire people, federal employees, even if they are serving terms that go into the new president's tenure. In other words, the president can fire anybody who is a political appointee for any reason, and regardless of whether they have an existing term. So sure enough, Sean Spicer and this other guy filed this lawsuit. The other guy's name is Vogt, V-O-U-G-H-T, and said, we have a congressionally mandated term. Our term is not up. Biden can't fire us. The court basically said, actually, yes, he can, because regardless of whether you have a term or not, a president has the authority to fire anybody in the political branch who is a political appointee. And Sean Spicer says his reaction to that was, yay. In other words, what Sean Spicer said he was doing is he said, I wanted to create a precedent in which a Trump or a Republican president could come in and basically wipe the slate clean, kick all these people out. But prior to my case, it was not established law whether the president could do that. But he said, ironically, Biden, in a rather gratuitous and very typically kind of mean-spirited way. Why? Because look, you're not talking about Sean Spicer running one of Biden's agencies. He wasn't in charge of the FDA. No, he's on the board of some obscure military commission. It's probably largely honorary. You show up 4 times a year, have a meeting, and then go home. But no, the Biden people were like, get rid of this guy. He's not our guy. And Spicer's point is that, so Biden got what he wanted. But now, this exact same precedent works to the benefit of Trump. Why? Because it is now clearly established as a matter of law that Trump does not have to go around finding out, when does this guy's term expire? Because I remember thinking back to the Reagan days, there were people who were leftovers from the earlier administration, say Jimmy Carter, and Reagan would have to wait them out. Sorry, this guy's got another year on his term. We'll have to wait for that to expire. Then we can put our guy in, but not until then. Well, we now have a precedent that says that Trump can have a clean slate really from day one. So hopefully somebody in the transition team is going through all the political appointees, finding all the Sean Spicers on the other side, people who are serving even in minor posts throughout the administration, so that on day one, these people can all get a letter. All these Democrats can get a letter. And by the way, I would use the same draft of the letter I was reading you, which is essentially on behalf of President Trump. I'm substituting Trump's name for Biden. I'm requesting your resignation from so-and-so position by close of business today. Should we not receive your resignation, your position will be terminated effective 6 p.m. tonight. And then I would add a few lines just for fun, things like, you know, your family photos and the stuff on your desk is you will have to pick up from the street, because it's going to be moved out in a box. So you can come and collect it that way. So this is a very nice case of how the Biden administration, through its vindictiveness, helps to establish a precedent that we can take advantage of. We're in the Christmas season, and MyPillow is excited to announce that the MyPillow Christmas Extravaganza is finally here. Get this season's flannel sheets as low as $59.98. They won't last long. Get them while you can. The famous My Slippers, these haven't been on sale for over a year. They used to be regular price, $119.98, but now for a limited time, $59.98. And the 6-piece towel sets back in stock, limited quantities, only $29.98. So there are just hundreds of products here, something for everyone on your Christmas list, from bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, so much more. Go to mypillow.com, or you can call 800-876-0227. Again, it's 800-876-0227. Use promo code Dinesh and save on all the MyPillow products. Flannel sheets as low as $59.98. 6-piece towel sets just $29.98. And there's more. They're extending their 60-day money-back guarantee till March 1st, 2025. Plus, all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing ShareRight. It's healthcare done the right way. At ShareRight, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With ShareRight, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. ShareRight ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With ShareRight, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today. Take control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Visit shareright.org/Dinesh. That's shareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way. Guys, I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast a new guest, Giovanni Capriglione. He is a Texas State Rep, District 98. And here's his background. He has a BS in physics, an MBA in finance from Santa Clara University. He worked on semiconductors in Silicon Valley. He's worked in venture capital and private equity. And he's very involved in the Texas legislature on issues of artificial intelligence, technology, money, cybersecurity, those kinds of things. And I asked him to come on to discuss a new bill, which we're about to talk about in a minute. By the way, you can follow him on X at Vote Giovanni, Giovanni, and the website votegiovanni.com. Gio, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you about a new bill that you have in the Texas legislature, and that is a bill to create a strategic reserve for the state of Texas in Bitcoin. Now, this is a bit of a new topic, I think, for many of my listeners and viewers. So let's begin with a couple of basics. People kind of know about Bitcoin. It is digital currency. It's been around for about 15 years, and it's dramatically gone up in value. But if you were to explain to someone who's kind of a skeptic and said, well, what is Bitcoin and what are you trying to do by asking the state of Texas to create a Bitcoin reserve? What would that mean?
Sure. Well, that's a great question and probably a long answer that goes with it. But Dinesh, thank you so much for having me on here. So we filed the bill just last week. It's House Bill 1589, if someone wants to look it up, and it's the Texas Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. And in a nutshell, Bitcoin is a type of digital asset, right? It's a way to convey worth and value in a way that's different than the dollar, for instance. And it's virtual in a lot of ways the same way that the dollar is, right? A lot of people don't have a lot of cash on hand, right? They're relying on whatever digital assets are listed in their bank account and so on. But we treat that as value as well. And while that value is based on the full faith and credit of the United States, this is based on a type of technology, blockchain technology, that provides incredible value for people all over the world. It's a type of decentralized value, right? Where it's not fixed like the dollar is to the Federal Reserve. So there's no risk of inflation. There's no risk of what happens every day to our dollar, which is some devaluing that's happening. And the really neat thing, besides the decentralization part of Bitcoin, is that it's very easy to use. It's very portable. It's also very secure. And for those reasons, it has inherent value. It has value to the people who own it and the people who want to purchase it. And because of that, as you pointed out, its value has gone up.
How would you compare the value of Bitcoin to, say, the value of gold? And I ask you that because I think I saw Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, the chairman, say that Bitcoin is, quote, digital gold or akin to digital gold. What are the kind of relative advantages and disadvantages of Bitcoin, let's say, vis-a-vis gold?
Sure. Well, first, great segue. I passed legislation a few years back to let Texas have and be the only state in the world that has its own precious metals depository. Created a state agency that allows Texas and its treasury to store gold for any citizen in Texas. The obvious difference is it's a lot more difficult to carry around a bunch of gold, right? It's less portable. It is harder to transact with than, let's say, Bitcoin is, right? Similar, though, in ways that they're the same, is there's a finite supply of gold. At the end of the day, there's a finite supply, and there's a finite amount of Bitcoin that's available. And so one of the things that some people are looking at, and I'm looking at too, is a way to combine both Bitcoin and gold, right? Have gold-backed Bitcoin, for instance, right? But gold is also historically been known as a hedge against inflation, right? If you go and you look at the value of gold over time, you see that it's kept its relative worth, and it rises in anticipation of federal government overspending, for instance, and those sort of things. In that same way, Bitcoin can be used as a hedge against inflation, right? And that's one of the reasons why I've proposed this bill, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, is because I want the state of Texas to diversify its assets. We do have gold, okay? We have other precious metals. We have cash. We have bonds. We have stocks, municipal bonds. But it makes incredible amount of sense for the state to have a reserve and an account with Bitcoin and lots of other assets, right? I mean, that's how a well-run state with literally hundreds of billions of dollars under management should invest.
And wouldn't you also say that one of the rationales for this is not merely diversification in the broad sense, because diversification is just a way of saying, I don't know what is going to go up the most, let's say, over the next 10 years. So let me have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But one of the things we do know is that our government, and we live at a time when, currencies are controlled by federal governments, right? All over the world, there are some 150 governments. They control their own currencies. And I think without exception, it's fair to say that they are all in some way printing money, which is to say diluting the currency. The currency is losing value. And so Bitcoin, like gold, is a way to shore up against that, right? Because the amount of gold every year that's minted is quite small compared to the amount of gold that there is in existence. And similarly, the supply of Bitcoin is just algebraically, mathematically, strictly fixed. So it seems like what you have in mind here is to protect the finances of Texas by putting some of Texas's resources into an asset that isn't going to be diluted through inflation. Would that be right?
No, that's exactly right. And I think what you hit on, which is key, is that Bitcoin is free from control from central authorities like the Federal Reserve or the governments or banks. I mean, we all know what's happened over the last 100 years or so, is that whenever the government needs more money, it simply turns a dial, right? And it simply allows more currency to appear out of thin air. Okay, not even borrowed, right? A lot of it is just made out of thin air. And what that does is it creates a supply imbalance, right? And so now you have a lot of dollars, and as there's too much supply, then the value goes down. And we've seen that happen time and time again. But what we've also done as individuals is ceded this liberty, ceded this authority to a government to be able to control the value of our work, the value of our assets, right? And so what Bitcoin, and by having Texas have that, we take control back, right? And we take control back not to the state, but to the people of the state, right? And that's the incredible promise and premise of Bitcoin is the decentralization nature of it, the freedom from government control, and the ability of people to transact as they want to.
Gio, let's look at the bill itself. I have it in front of me, and I want to highlight a couple of its provisions. One is you want Texas to buy and hold Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. You want Texas to store this Bitcoin in cold storage or in a safe way for at least 5 years. You want to allow state agencies to accept cryptocurrencies and convert them into Bitcoin. If it were up to you, how much Bitcoin would you buy on behalf of the state of Texas? And second of all, this kind of idea, which, I suppose would be extremely novel if it was 5 years ago. I don't think it's quite as shocking as it is perhaps today. What is the initial reception that you're getting from your colleagues when you spring this idea on them?
Right. And we did spring this idea on them a little bit last week. So I'll answer the last question first. It has become incredibly popular. A lot of my colleagues are interested in supporting me. We have this thing called joint authorship or co-authorship, where you can show support for legislation by other members that have a vote signing their name onto it. And I've already received a lot of members. We haven't even started session yet, and already members are wanting to support it. And I have not seen any negatives either from my members or from constituents, all positive things. Okay, so people are excited about this because they see the value of Texas having its own reserve of what we talked about, a decentralized hedge diversification. I mean, we could talk about how it helps with our energy utilization here in Texas, how it's going to help with innovative technologies and our workforce, but the excitement is there. In terms of if it were up to me, I've worked a lot on what we call the Public Investment Act, which is kind of like a legislative way on, hey, here's things we can invest in. Here's countries you don't invest in. Here's things you don't invest in, but here's things that you do. And I think, for me, I'll leave it to very smart fund managers to make the decisions on diversification. But I've seen some people that are floating this on the federal level talking about up to 2%, right, of their total reserves being in Bitcoin. And I definitely want to allow the ability for our investment managers to use financial fiduciary responsibility to make that decision. But just think of the promise of and the benefit of having a state that is able to accept Bitcoins as a form of payment, right? I mean, people who have these assets that maybe want to, they want to pay their property taxes or they want to pay fees to government agencies, they should be able to do that, right? There's no reason why. And then the state should be able to accept that. And that keeps that whole ecosystem continuing to work and to thrive. And listen, I'm a Texas state rep. This is the greatest state in the entire country, right? And so I want this to be here in the 7th largest economy in the world. And I want the biggest one, and I want to be first.
Do you, is there, are you finding that there is a bit of an ideological divide on this issue? And I say that because, as you know, by and large, the Democrats are the party of larger government, the Republicans are the party of smaller government. I can see why an idea that has its roots in, libertarian guys who wanted to break free of the confines of the government came up with this idea of Bitcoin, and it made it immensely successful. Do you find the Democrats are a little bit like, well, this might be taking away the reins of the of federal control over money, which is a beautiful tool that they have been able to use to dilute people's money, right? I mean, normally the government raises money through taxes, but that's a little bit painful. If you went to the taxpayer and go, you need to fork up some more money because I've got some cockamamie scheme,
Right.
it's going to be hard to do. But if you can covertly dilute that guy's money without him knowing about it, that's a much more attractive idea for a lot of elected officials. Or are you finding, which would be a surprise to me, the Democrats are just as enthusiastic as Republicans?
Oh, get ready to be surprised, because the reality is nobody wants the government telling them how much their money is worth. No one wants the government, okay, to keep track of them. If you just think about the last administration, when it first came in, talking about tracking $600 payments, right? Tracking Venmo. The previous, I say the previous, the current administration, soon to be the previous administration, right? I mean, just think about how much they talked about the US CBDC, right? Having its own currency, digital cryptocurrency. And so they have been for a long time trying to get rid of cash, right? And what is the value of cash? Where I can go to private parties doing a transaction outside of government purview, right? And so this current administration has done that over and over again, trying to restrict people from doing that. But there's a difference between the parties and there's a difference between people, okay? And people would like this freedom that comes with it. And what I have seen, at least with this bill and other tech bills that I've worked on over session, is that there's a lot of bipartisan support for this. I worked on legislation last year, last session, I passed it. And what it was to allow getting rid of taxes on gas that would be flared, natural gas that would be flared, if it was used for a Bitcoin mining operation, right? Because right now we have, let's say, excess gas, and it's just being destroyed, right? I mean, it's being burned, it's harmful for the environment, and it costs money, but you don't have to pay taxes if you do that. So I said, well, what if you'd use it for Bitcoin mining, and you're actually using that waste? I passed that bill unanimously with Democrats and Republicans supporting it, right? So sometimes things like this, which is freedom, freedom of assembly, freedom of partnership, freedom of money, is, I think, a bipartisan idea, right?
I've seen some of this, honestly, even at the national level. I mean, interestingly, for example, Jack Dorsey, who was, I suppose politically, you could see him on the left, nevertheless, a big champion of Bitcoin. I just saw a little video. Mark Cuban was talking about how he thinks that the hostility of the Kamala Harris regime to cryptocurrency might have helped cost her the election. So you may be onto something, and this is a very interesting thing. We'll be watching it very carefully. Guys, I've been talking to Giovanni Capriglione, Texas State Rep District 98. His website, votegiovanni.com. Follow him on X at votegiovanni. Gio, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was great. I appreciate it.
I'm discussing the big lie, and we are at a very interesting section on the origins of fascism. Fascism, like Leninism, arose out of the breakdown of the predictions of Marxism. And in fact, the failure, you could say, of the Marxist ideology to comprehend the world as it is, or as it was, in the early 20th century. Now, the Marxist camp splintered into three. One group were the Marxists who just said, Marx is right, he's the original apostle, we have to follow Marx. It doesn't matter if it doesn't square with anything else, we're just going to put our head down and be classical Marxists. There were people like that in Germany, in the United States. And they sort of stuck with the program. But there were two famous heretics who figured out that they needed to develop a different path. One of them was Lenin, and the other was Mussolini. And so out of Marxism, you get two new things. Leninism, which claimed the mantle of Marxism, but is quite different from it. And fascism, which also claimed the mantle of Marxism, or at least socialism, but was in some ways quite different from it. So let's begin with Leninism. Lenin broke with Marx really on one key point. And that is that Lenin said the problem with Marx is that he expects way too much from working people. Lenin said that the proletariat is really too downtrodden to revolt at all. And so the reason Marx's prophecies haven't come true is he's looking in the wrong place to find his revolutionaries. He's looking to the plumbers and the stonemasons to revolt. They're not going to. Lenin said to have a revolution, you need revolutionaries. You need intellectual revolutionaries, you need organizational revolutionaries, and you need military revolutionaries. And so that means you need students, you need professors, you need lawyers, you need soldiers, you need fighters. These are the people who can actually bring about a revolution. And these are the people that Lenin collected around him, and these are the people who caused the Russian Revolution. So in a sense, what Lenin is saying is that the socialist revolution, the Marxist revolution, the communist revolution is not going to be carried out by the working class. It has to be sort of done for the working class by somebody else. This was Lenin's great disagreement with Marx. But Lenin did agree with Marx about something else. And that is, Lenin agreed that although you could begin the revolution somewhere, like in Russia, as Lenin did, Lenin fully expected this revolution to go worldwide. Why? Because the oppression is worldwide. Lenin accepted, by and large, the framework that said that that society is divided into these two camps, the capitalist class, the working class. That, Lenin said, is happening everywhere. And so Lenin predicted that you will have a global communist revolution. And in fact, ultimately, just as Marx said, the state itself would wither away. Now, this is kind of amusing in a kind of grim way. It's black humor, if you want to call it that, because what happened in Russia was Lenin creates this totalitarian state. It is overweening. It governs every aspect of life, public as well as private. So here's Lenin predicting, oh, the state will go away, when he, Lenin himself, is ruling with an iron rod over a state that shows no sign of going away. In fact, didn't go away, the communist state, for another 70 years. But Lenin, nevertheless, I think was sincere, at least sincere in his theoretical belief that at some point the state would in fact wither away. And Lenin agreed with Marx that ultimately even national divisions would subside because, as Marx himself once put it, the working man has no country. This is a key idea in Marx, which is that I'm not an American or an Indian, I'm not a German, I'm a working man. That's really what matters. The dividing line is between the working man and the capitalist who exploits him. And that's happening in every country. So who cares if I'm on this side of the border or that? It doesn't matter. It is my class status or membership that matters the most. This is really the key point at which Mussolini breaks with both Lenin and with Marx. Now, Mussolini started very much in the Marxist camp. Mussolini started very much with the idea that national divisions are unimportant. In fact, Mussolini ridiculed the idea of like an Italian heritage. He didn't like the Italian flag. He said patriotism is a joke. It's just a contrivance by the upper class to exploit the lower class. In other words, they don't want the lower class to focus on its miseries, and so they go, oh, let's have a parade, let's all salute the flag, let's all jump up and down and sing the national song. Mussolini said, we don't have time for any of this nonsense. This was the I shouldn't say the old Mussolini, but really the young Mussolini. As a young man, Mussolini believed that the Italian flag, in fact, I'm now quoting him, was a rag that should be, quote, planted on a dunghill. So this is how Mussolini started, very much in the Marxist camp, but he knew that the Marxist predictions were not coming true, and he was looking for a better way to understand what was happening, not just in Italy, but around the world. And then Mussolini made a rather remarkable discovery. He discovered that the working man, when you ask him, or when you, even more important, look at his conduct, you notice that he is very attached to his own country. Not only that, he's more attached to his own country than he is to his class. Case in point, let's say, for example, there is a war between England and France, or between, let's say, Italy and Tunisia. Does the Italian soldier say, well, guess what? I used to be a farmer in Italy, and my real solidarity is with the farmers over in Tunisia. They're on my side. No. The Italian says, I'm an Italian first and foremost. I'm in the Italian army. The Tunisians are the bad guys. They're on the other side. Forward march. So Mussolini noticed that as a practical matter, you have people who are attached to their own country, and even more significant, willing to give up their life for their own country. This is a very striking phenomenon. People, for example, are not willing to give up their lives for just about anything, right? Would you give up your life for, like, the United Way? No. Would you give up your life for Amnesty International? No. How about the UN? No. How about would you give up your life for Peoria, Illinois? No. But lots of people give up their life for the United States, for their country. And so nationalism, it's not the only thing, by the way, that commands your allegiance. There are people who will give up their life for their faith, for example, but there are very few things on that list for which you would be willing to give up your life. And Mussolini noticed, he fought in World War I. And in fighting in World War I, he noticed that people were very loyal to Italy. And he said when the war was over, they had been fighting all over the world. They were like, you know what? I got to go back to Italy. I got to go back to my town in Sicily or Campania, and I've got to become an Italian all over again, so to speak. And so Mussolini noticed that this attachment to the nation, nationalism, is a very powerful force indeed. Now, around Mussolini were a group of intellectuals who began to think about these things in a much broader way. Mussolini was thinking about it in a narrow way, which is, hey, I see soldiers, they fought for Italy, they're loyal to Italy, and they're not going to give that up. But around Mussolini were a group of intellectuals. These are people like Roberto Michels, a guy named Enrico Corradini, Alfredo Rocco, and these people began to think, and they began to say, look, Italy had a unification. This was called the Risorgimento. It was, Italy used to be a bunch of separate city-states. So if you go back, for example, to not just the time of Dante, but you continue through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, even in the modern era, Italy was broken up. Venice was its own little country, and so was Florence, and so was Siena, and so was Lucca. But in the end of the 19th century, there was a unification of Italy, but the unification was fragile. Italy still didn't have a powerful national consciousness that was fully developed. And so these intellectuals around Mussolini said, look, we need to strengthen people's commitment to their country, particularly to our country, particularly to Italy, and this will create a second Risorgimento, which is to say, hey, look at England. Everybody in England considers himself to be an Englishman. Look at France. Everybody in France says, I'm a Frenchman. But in Italy, it's not so clear. So let us fortify this attachment of the country. It's already there, but let's make it even stronger. And this mode of thinking gave Mussolini the idea, and the people around him the idea, what if we take the old Marxist idea of class, of a proletariat, of a downtrodden, class attachment, and marry it or attach it to the idea of national solidarity, i.e. patriotism, i.e. nationalism. Then you get a new hybrid. It is a hybrid of nationhood along with socialism. In other words, it is national socialism. So the key dividing line between Mussolini on the one side and Lenin on the other is Lenin believed in international socialism, and Mussolini believed in national socialism, an idea that would soon crystallize into fascism.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.